Hello, and thank you for being here with me. If you enjoy mythology and deeper dives like this, consider subscribing and sharing your thoughts in the comments. We humans have always dreamed of going higher. Long before airplanes or rockets, people imagined what it might feel like to rise above the ground, to leave the limits of the earth behind, and move freely through the sky. Flight has always represented something larger than just movement. It represents freedom, possibility, and the desire to reach beyond what we are told is possible. But every dream that reaches upward eventually encounters a limit. The ancient Greeks told the story of Icarus, a boy who discovered his limit when he touched the sky. Most people remember the lesson as a warning: do not fly too high, do not chase ambition too far, do not ignore the wisdom of those who came before you. But the story also leaves another question behind. When Icarus fell from the sky, did he fail? Or did he simply reach further than humans were meant to go? The story begins not with ambition, but with imprisonment. The brilliant craftsman Daedalus and his son Icarus were trapped on the island of Crete by the powerful king Minos. Daedalus himself had once served the king, building wonders and solving problems that no one else could solve. But a mind capable of creating miracles can also become dangerous to those who rule. Minos feared that Daedalus knew too many secrets about the island and its labyrinth, and so he made sure the inventor and his son could never leave. The seas surrounding Crete were watched, the ships controlled, and every path back to freedom was sealed. Escape by land was impossible. Escape by sea was impossible, and every ordinary path was closed. But Daedalus was not an ordinary man, and when the earth and the sea were denied to him, he began to consider the only direction that remained open. Both the land and sea were controlled by King Minos, so Daedalus looked upward where the sky remained free. Slowly, patiently, he began to gather feathers, fastening them together with thread and sealing them with wax until they formed great wings, large enough to carry a human through the air. It was an invention that seemed to defy the limits of nature itself. Humans were not meant to fly. That privilege belonged to birds and gods. Yet Daedalus believed that intelligence could accomplish what nature had denied. When the wings were finished, he fitted one pair to his own shoulders and another to his son's. In that moment, the impossible became real. They would not escape by strength or by stealth, but by rising above the very world that had imprisoned them. Before they left the ground, Daedalus gave his son a warning. The wings were powerful, but they were fragile, held together by wax that could fail if pushed too far. If Icarus flew too low, the spray of the sea could weigh the feathers down and drag him into the water. If he flew too high, the heat of the sun could melt the wax and pull the wings apart. The only safe path was between those extremes. Stay in the middle, Daedalus told him. Not too low, not too high. It was careful advice, the kind given by someone who understands both the brilliance of invention and the dangers that come with it. For Daedalus, the wings were a tool meant to restore freedom for him and his son. But for Icarus, the wings would become something else entirely. When they finally leapt from the cliffs of Crete, something extraordinary happened. The wings held. The air lifted beneath them, and for the first time in human memory, a man and his son rose into the sky like birds. Below them, the sea stretched endlessly, the ships of King Minos growing smaller with every beat of their wings. What had once been a prison was now far beneath them. For Daedalus, the flight was a careful calculation, every movement controlled, every turn measured. But for Icarus, it was something entirely different. He was no longer trapped on an island or bound to the earth. He was flying. The wind carried him upward, the sun warmed his face, and the world below seemed to fall away. In that moment, the sky felt limitless and without boundary, open freedom. As their flight continued, the exhilaration of that freedom began to change something inside him. Icarus had been warned to follow the middle path, but the sky stretched wide above him, empty and inviting. Each beat of his wings carried him a little higher, a little further from the careful course his father had described. The sea grew distant below, the horizon widened, and the warmth of the sun grew stronger as he climbed. It was not necessarily defiance that drew him upward, it was wonder. For the first time in his life, the limits that had always defined the world seemed to disappear. The higher he rose, the more the sky seemed to promise that there was still more above him waiting to be reached. But the sky was never truly without limits. As Icarus climbed higher, the warmth of the sun began to change from comfort to danger. The wax that held the feathers together slowly softened beneath the heat, weakening the wings that had carried him so far from the earth. At first, the change was subtle, a feather loosening here, another drifting away into the air behind him. Then the structure began to fail entirely, and the wings that had lifted him toward the sun could no longer hold their shape. Feathers scattered into the wind, the frame collapsed, and the sky that had felt limitless only moments before suddenly offered nothing to hold him. Icarus fell, the sea rising quickly beneath him, until the boy who had reached the sky disappeared into the water below. The story is usually told as a warning: do not fly too high, do not ignore wisdom, do not let ambition carry you beyond the limits that the world has set. And in many ways that lesson makes sense. Daedalus survived because he respected the boundaries of the sky, while Icarus fell because he believed those boundaries could be ignored. But the myth also leaves a quieter question behind. Icarus did not fall because he was cruel or reckless or driven by power. He fell because he experienced something extraordinary and wanted more of it. For a brief moment, he rose higher than any human before him, touching a place that had always belonged to birds and gods. The price of that moment was everything. And so the story leaves us with a difficult tension: the safety of limits on one side and the possibility of something greater on the other. Which brings us back to the question quietly left behind by the story of Icarus. Did Icarus fail? Or did he simply refuse to live within the limits set before him? Daedalus survived because he flew carefully, respecting the balance between ambition and restraint. Icarus did not. He rose higher, chasing the exhilaration of the sky until the fragile wings that carried him could no longer hold. The fall that followed is remembered as a warning about pride and recklessness, and perhaps that is part of the lesson. But the myth can also be read another way. For one brief moment, a human being reached into the sky and experienced something no one else had ever known. The price of that moment would cost Icarus his life, but that leaves us with a question that has never had an easy answer. Is it better to live safely within the limits of the world, or to risk everything reaching beyond them?